Hello, it's Just Party doing another Budget Builder deck tech, and today we're doing Barrier Statue Stun. Barrier Statue Stun is a pretty budget and simple to play archetype where the goal is to basically slam down one of your barrier statues, each which locks an opponent out of, well, every player out of special summoning monsters except for the specified attribute on the barrier statue. But I digress. Let's move to the actual deck list itself. Starting off with Psyframe Driver, because we're playing 3 copies of Gamma, 3 copies of Inspector Boarder, a very hard to get over creature monster which you can normal summon on turn 1, and there are just some matchups where this will just completely out or lock your opponent out of the game. Up next we have 3 copies of Fossil Diana Aciphelio, a card that just says neither player can special summon any monsters, which is fine because you're not going to do that anyway. 3 copies of Barrier Statues of the Torrent, probably the best one right now because there's not really any water attribute monsters that players are trying to special summon right now. 1 copy of Barrier Statue of the Drought. 3 copies of Barrier Statue of the Inferno. You can swap this one out with Barrier Statue of the Wind depending on how your metagame shapes out. And you can also switch out the Barrier Statue or the one of Barrier Statue of the Drought with any of the other barrier statues depending on what you see a lot in your meta or what the meta tends to be at the moment. Got 3 copies of Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, a budget option hand trap. The 3 driver or 3 Gamma for the driver, just a very good hand trap. 3 copies of Effect Veiler, very cheap and solid hand trap. 3 copies of Pot of Desires because you need some way to get a card advantage. And the problem is, Pot of Extravagance is still a expensive enough card that it can't really make its way into a budget list. But if you had Extravagance, you could slam 15 nothing cards into your extra deck, and that would be a good upgrade. 1 copy of Monster Reborn, just in case your field gets cleared. 3 copies of Pot of Duality, because, face it, you're not ever going to use any special summons during your turn anyway. Up next we have 1 copy of Forbidden Chalice, just a decent form of disruption that has random applications in certain matchups. And then we have the things to keep our barrier statues alive. 3 copies of Power of the Guardian, which basically makes any of the monsters immune to being destroyed by battle or card effects, because every time that the monster that this is equipped to would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can remove one of the spell counters from it. So it's immune to battle at least, and card effect only if you have gotten the spell counters up to a reasonable number. But it's basically a slightly, well, situationally better, situationally worse version of Moonmirror Shield, which will always make sure that your monster's attack is higher than the opposing monster by 100 during damage calc only, but sometimes can be more than that depending on what you're swinging into. And finally, 3 copies of Crackdown because it's excellent spot removal and lets you take any potentially problematic monsters that can attack over the barrier statues. Up next we have the sideboard. 3 copies of Humongous for going second. 3 copies of Cosmic Cyclone for back row decks. 3 copies of There Can Be Only One, because checking the types of all of these, you're not going to see more than one of most of these for more than one type on the field at a time, because you tend to want to hold back multiple copies of barrier statues. It's usually fine to have 2, but you want to keep at least a few back in hand just in case there is some sort of weight or card that removes the rest of them from the field, so you can set up for the later turns. 3 copies of Dark Bribe, because giving our opponents stuff isn't really that much of a problem, but spell and traps can be a bit of a problem, so 3 copies of that. And finally, 3 copies of Dimension Shifter. We don't really use our graveyard, and there are some matchups where just using this will shut down an opponent. Well, hope you enjoyed the video, and hope you have an excellent day.